Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. If you are an Air Canada passenger, listen up. The airline says it will begin canceling flights tomorrow ahead of a potential strike that could see thousands of flight attendants walk off the job this weekend. We're going to speak with a member of that union, hear from Air Canada, and we want to hear from you. And in our second half hour, it is a championship battle. The showdown for BC's best symbol is between the Orca and the totem pole. Our Justin McElroy will be here to talk about the fight for the title, and we want to hear from you. I'm Dan Burwood, in for Michelle Elliott. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and on the live stream. You can call us now on our top story. How does the potential job action and disruption at Air Canada affect you? What do you make of the flight attendants' requests and how the airline is responding? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950 across BC. Here in Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone, but please be pulled over or hands-free if you're driving, or you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and feel free to message us on TikTok as well. Now, that potential labor disruption at Canada's largest airline is throwing summer travel plans in flux for a lot of people this weekend and possibly beyond. Over the next 72 hours, Air Canada says it will begin gradually cancelling flights ahead of a potential walkout by more than 10,000 flight attendants. That could happen as early as Friday at 9:58 p.m. Pacific time. The Canadian Union of Public Employees gave the carrier a requisite 72-hour strike notice overnight, following the two sides reaching an impasse. The airline claims the job action could affect about 130,000 customers every day. It advises people who book travel between August 15th and 18th that they can change their flight if they want. Customers will be notified if the flight will be scrubbed and given a refund. We spoke with several passengers at YVR this morning.
Missing work because of the delayed flights. So I wonder if they'll be compensating me for missing work. I'm worried if I should go in the first place.
I'm not too worried about it, though. I mean, I think that they should be compensated for how long they're on the job, right? So, but I'm not too worried about it. I think it'll get resolved.
Hoping that they can get me onto another flight or a different airline, and with them, yeah, with the employees, they should get paid whenever they're, outside of helping, helping the customers and stuff. Yeah.
In response to the union's strike notice, Air Canada issued a notice of lockout set to start this weekend. The two sides have been negotiating a new collective agreement since March over wages, work rules, and unpaid hours. Christophe Enabel is Air Canada's Vice President of Corporate Communications. He says there is still a huge gap between the union's requests and what he says the airline is able to offer.
We've offered an increase of more than 38% on global compensation, and that's been turned down by the union. So time is running short. What we are saying is that we've tried everything, and we are still trying hard. We are still at the table as we speak. We've offered arbitration to CUPE to find any possible solution to avoid what could be potentially a major disruption in the coming days. If all that fails, and it seems to be the case, then government stepping in is the best solution to avoid such a major disruption.
Meanwhile, Canada's Jobs Minister says she is closely monitoring this situation. In a statement posted on X, Patty Hajdu says she is encouraging both parties to stay at the table until a deal is found. She wrote in part, federal mediators will remain available until a deal is reached. The best agreements are the ones the parties reach themselves. Canadians expect them to reach a deal one way or another. For much more on this story, we're now joined in studio by Henly Larden, the interim president for CUPE Local 4094 and an Air Canada flight attendant based here in Metro Vancouver. Henly, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan.
We've spoken with you several times this week. You, I believe it was on Monday, you had what we called an information picket at YVR. Between now and then, as far as you understand, how have things gone at the bargaining table?
Well, to be clear, CUPE is still there. We're still ready to bargain. We're still willing. The intent is still that we do not strike. While it's been served, it was our forced hand. Air Canada has stopped negotiating, and they are expecting the government to step in. And we plead that that not be the case, because ultimately we want to set precedent for going forward. We want to soar a path. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not being compensated fairly. We are below poverty wages, and what has been brought to the table is a percent less than what it should be beyond what our past 10 years has been.
Only a percentage.
1% below what we should be at the end of our 10 years. So at this stage in time, there's so many questions, but the crux of our unpaid work was that we're still not getting paid.
And if you can remind us, with the issue of unpaid work, can you take us through that? When does that start? When does that end in a typical shift and workday for you, for example?
Yes, absolutely. So when you check in, it takes, depending on the proximity to the airport, we check in off site, and then from there we make our way through security, and then up to the aircraft. We have to do our safety briefing. We do the briefing of passengers while they're boarding. We ensure that there's anything that's safety related leading up and prior to, all of that is unpaid. If there's a medical, it is unpaid. And until we disembark and those wheels push back, only at that time does our clock start running.
How, you've mentioned this before, but when you speak with passengers, do they know that that work is unpaid from the time that you get there to only when you say the plane is actually moving?
I would venture to say a majority of our Canadian passengers do not know that. They're not familiar with how important and critical this is. Ultimately, when we're not paid, we are safety critical professionals, and no one in 2025 should be expected to work for free.
When you mention this to Air Canada, what is their response back? Because I think a lot of Canadians would think, well, your shift starts when you get to work, not when a certain piece of machinery starts moving. So what do they say to that?
Well, I mean, I can't say who at the table is saying what, but what I can say is this. Historically, this has been the case. For us, we want it to be no more.
Okay.
And this is where we're really incredibly adamant that we do not want any government interruption in this, because just because it was the past doesn't make it right. And we want to forge our way going forward. We want to set a new precedent, not only for Air Canada, but for all airlines going forward.
Has this been brought up, this issue of unpaid work unless the plane is moving? Has this been brought up before negotiations? Because I know I've heard from some people who've said they're surprised that this has been going on so long and wondering if your union has been pushing to end this beyond this current negotiation cycle.
Oh, I assure you, we have pleaded beyond not only to Air Canada, but to our MPs. We've gone to the public, and we want them to know and understand what this really means and equates to for us. When you're looking at 35 hours average unpaid a week, you're looking at a 40-hour week a month. That's going to work for free for an entire week every month. And I really ask people to understand what that means.
How long is a typical shift for you, including what you call unpaid and then the paid work? So
due to our workplace, it really depends on how we are scheduled. Say a typical 4.5 hour, you could be there six to eight. I mean, there's an hour check-in minimum. Beyond that, there's deplaning. We are there for the passengers and we want to support them, but it's really dependent on what your actual scheduled shift is.
Okay. Yeah. How long have you been working for Air Canada as a flight attendant now?
I was hired in 2017.
2017. So in your from then to now, and we had the massive disruption of the pandemic, what has working in this industry been like over your time?
You know what? Ultimately, our employees, inclusive of those that work on the ground, our pilots, all of us have kept this company, Air Canada, running. And so it's really unfortunate that they're not willing to acknowledge that we are the ones that have continued to stick to all that we're doing, all that we love to do for the people we love doing this for. And when you take a step back and you realize, okay, what is it that they're asking? We're asking to be paid for our work at normal wages that are not below the poverty line, which our current juniors are currently paid.
You would not be considered a junior, correct?
No, approximately the 3 to 5 year threshold, you're kind of moving beyond that, but it really depends. We have, due to turnover, we have a significant amount of our employees that are below that poverty line. I'm
going to ask you to stand by. We have calls piling up. Let's go perhaps first to Gord in Vancouver. Gord, what do you make of what's happening with Air Canada?
Hey, hi. Thanks for taking my call. Well, I mean, it's really unfortunate. that this has gone this way. It really disrupts plans. In fact, it disrupts my plans to the UK. But I'm just going to probably end up canceling it because there could be no other bloody way to get there. But I will say one thing. It really grates me when I find out that the CEO of Air Canada gets paid $12 million a year, and a startup flight attendant gets paid like $1,900 a month. That's like $20,000 something dollars. That's terrible. Those are poverty wages, and that has got to end. But I certainly agree with Henly. I think that Air Canada's tactics on the labor relations side is despicable. They have got an angle to get the jobs minister to force them to binding arbitration. And that's just not right in this day and age. And the other thing about unpaid work, my understanding, and Henly, correct me if I'm wrong, but that ceiling has been broken. Delta Airlines flight attendants in the States got through that. They are now paid. So this is not an industry-setting precedent like Air Canada has said in the Globe and Mail. So I fully support the flight attendants. Hang in there. And I'm sorry that you guys have to go this far with it, but someone in Air Canada, that current executive they need to go and they need to have fresh new people in there, fresh new eyes, and customer-focused and employee-focused for sure. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gord. Appreciate your call. Let's go to Sarah in Abbotsford. Sarah, how does this potential job action and canceling of flights affect you?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm listening to the show. I'm listening to both sides, and we're in a situation where we booked our son to go back to university in Montreal. His ticket was booked for Saturday. We heard the news, and we understood clearly that the strike action the walkout was going to be on Saturday. So we rebooked for Friday, cost us an additional $600, and now we're hearing that those flights are potentially not going to happen also. And on top of that, we had to book him hotel space because his apartment had been rented out during the summer. It's cost us a lot of money, and now we're still in a situation. I'm taking time off work to get him to the airport extra early. We've got all of this huge upset and extra expense, mixed messaging. And while I really understand, I do, and I sympathize, with those workers, there's real pain at the back end of this for customers who have bought in good faith, specifically with Air Canada, because we trust the airline. And I would just say, please just be clear on messaging because it's causing real hardship at the back end of this.
Sarah in Abbotsford, we appreciate your call. Henly, can I ask you to, how would you respond to Sarah?
You know what, Sarah, I do apologize, and we apologize to all of our passengers. Sincerely, the flight attendants do not want us to be on a work strike at any point in time. We've really come to the table in good faith, believing that Air Canada can, as they should, come and reach the threshold to which is reasonable. At this point in time, they have not. So I do sympathize with all of our passengers because you guys are the ones that brighten our day and you give us a purpose. But please stand behind us and show your support by letting people know and understand what this really is meaning to us all.
Henly, if I can put another number to you, Air Canada says they've put an offer on the table to increase compensation by 38%. How does the union respond to that number?
Well, we have to understand that that's inclusive of anything that has any cost associated to it. What I can say is what that number has been brought forth still puts us below the fair market value, below the inflation to this point, and would keep our junior flight attendants in the poverty line.
I can hear other people asking this as well, and not speaking for Air Canada. Can they afford to do this as far as you understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Bottom line is Air Canada's posted billions over the last few years in profits. They've been bringing themselves out of debt. They've been buying back shares. They have the money, and they have the money to increase wages without impact to passengers. And I think that's really what people need to understand. For whatever reason, they haven't come to the table. That's our bargaining committee's job role to see that through. But ultimately, we have 10,000 members who are saying enough is enough.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. between now and perhaps the start of tomorrow, what will you be doing, and what's the mood among your colleagues?
You know what, we're mad. We're done with this. It's really a challenge to believe in your company and kind of give your blood, sweat, and tears and know that you've done so many years of this unpaid work, and trying to say, you know what, going forward, let's change the way, let's make this happen in Canada. Thank you, Gord. But ultimately, we're frustrated because Air Canada can do it. They're just not doing it.
Henly Larden with CUPE Local 494, an Air Canada flight attendant based here in Vancouver. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's go to Angela in Vancouver. Angela, how does the Air Canada potential job action and shutdown affect you?
Yeah, well, Henly, I'm angry too. I am supposed to go on Friday on my, quote unquote trip of a lifetime. It's my 50th year. And I planned this incredible trip to Acadia with my cousin. We're like 10th generation Canadians, and we're planning to retrace the steps of our Acadian ancestors, like right from when they landed about 450 years ago. And I can't be satisfied with either a refund or a change in flight because I'm a single mom of 2 kids with disabilities. And I went to great lengths to arrange this trip to be able to go. I can't just rebook. And as far as a refund goes, I was able to score a killer deal that I just don't think a refund will get me the same trip again. So that's where I'm feeling right now.
I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much, Angela. That would be challenging at the best of times for anybody who's traveling. So we appreciate your call. If you're just joining us, Air Canada flight attendants have given 72-hour strike notice. They can legally go off the job as of 9:58 p.m. Friday night Pacific time. Air Canada has issued a lockout notice in response. They would lock out workers as of 10:30 p.m. Friday night. We want to hear from you. Do you have an Air Canada flight booked over the next few days or weeks? Has your flight been canceled? How could your end of summer travel plans and beyond be affected by a potential work stoppage? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 in Metro Vancouver. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. For more, we're going to go to Ian Lee. He's an economist and associate professor in the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. You've heard him on CBC News Network before. Ian, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Dan.
What do you make of what you heard from Air Canada and from the local union president before you around where this stands?
First off, I'm very sympathetic. I'm unionized at Carleton. I am also an Air Canada customer since the 1980s. I am also flying to Victoria to a wedding on Friday morning, and I had a return ticket with Air Canada next Wednesday, and I've already, out of my own pocket, booked alternatives tickets to return on another airline. So it's inconveniencing me too. But that's getting that out of the way. So I'm not here to defend Air Canada or the union. I wrote a paper about 10, 12 years ago called Striking Out. And it was an empirical, factual review of all the bills introduced in the Parliament of Canada from 1950 to 2012. And I updated it a year ago to show that in the last 65, 70 years, our Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, legislated striking workers back to work 37 times between 1950 and 2024. Liberal governments, conservative governments. The pattern in the data was fascinating. Every last strike, save and except 2 of the 37, so 35 of the 37 were in the transportation sector. Airlines, Toronto Airport, the GTA Pearson, Port of Vancouver, Port of Montreal, CN, CP. And so what I concluded was that although these unions have the legal right to strike, and they most certainly do have the right to strike, the reality is that the successive parliaments over 2/3 or more of a century have legislated striking workers back to work. And the reason I put forward as my theory was because the distances are so vast in this country, second largest country in the world, and we're so utterly dependent on transportation, railroads, ports, airlines, etc., that this is why. I'm not taking sides in this issue, I assure you. I'm just presenting the empirical, factual data from the Parliament of Canada. And in each instance, they rush these bills back, literally. First reading in the morning, second reading in the afternoon, third reading the next day, off to Senate. Sometimes they put them through in one day. So this shows what Parliament is thinking. It's not what I think. It's what the successive parliaments have done in our country.
Let's go to Caroline in Fort St. John. Caroline, what's your what will be the impact for you if Air Canada shuts down its flights?
Well, on Monday, I'm supposed to leave Sunday from Fort St. John to Vancouver, Vancouver to Kelowna for lung surgery with cancer. So it's kind of sad that I've made all these preparations, doctors' visits, and flying to Prince George today for a breathing test to have the end result of no surgery, to have to do everything else again.
Caroline, are you able to rebook on a different airline? Do you have another option for travel?
No, I don't. Not at this point yet.
And how long have you been waiting for this surgery, if I can ask?
Since the beginning of June.
This has got to be really frustrating.
It is. With the, I have to bring on a companion with me to be released out of the hospital. So the money aspect is a lot. It's sad that I can't get my surgery. But,
now, I suppose we should emphasize that flights, we're still waiting. There's potential job action. Caroline, just before we go to the break, I'll give you the last word before that. What would you say to both the flight attendants and Air Canada?
I sympathize with them. I really think it is unfair that they do not get paid for work, and I support their strike 100%. It's just I'm in the sad situation, that's all.
Caroline, we really appreciate your call. All the best to you in treatment. Ian Lee, stick with us. We are going to take our break now ahead of and we're going to continue the segment. If you're on the line, please stay on the line. I'm Dan Burritt in for Michelle Elliott. You're listening to BC Today. Thanks for joining us. It is just before 12:28. We're going to go back to our top story in just a moment. But yesterday, we spoke about a BC Supreme Court ruling confirming Cowichan Aboriginal title and fishing rights over the stretch of land on Lulu Island in Richmond, next to the south arm of the Fraser River, where the nation historically had a summer village and members fished for salmon. That land is now occupied by private homes as well as Crown and City of Richmond property and holdings. The BC government says it plans to appeal that ruling, and plenty of you emailed and called. I'll read a few of them. Emma Boo says, why is there an immediate conclusion that the Indigenous community will boot people off land? That did not happen in Williams Lake. Please, let's not do an us and them. Learn. Thank you, Emma. I appreciate that email. Joanne in Victoria says, I am Clay Tenay First Nation and wonder why the provincial government is going to spend millions of tax dollars fighting land title of Aboriginal rights. The province adopted UNDRIP, and this flies in the face of supporting this doctrine. David says, in part, we need more creative visions about how settler governments can transfer control of land back to the original First Nations stewards. This would be a key step towards what he calls reconciliation. And it's also worth noting, in this ruling, the judge ruled the province has a duty to negotiate with the nation when it comes to the private land whose titles were granted in what she called an unjustifiable infringement of Cowichan's Aboriginal title. You can read much more about this story. Again, this is an 800-page ruling, one of, if not the longest trial in Canadian history. Much more on our website, cbc.ca/BC. We're going to get back to your calls about Air Canada in just a moment. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. You're listening and watching BC Today. You're listening to BC Today on CBC. We are on CBC Radio 1 and on CBC Television and live streaming on our website and on YouTube. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. Time for a news break with Tarnjeet Parmar.
Good afternoon. Fire crews continue to battle the out-of-control Mount Underwood fire on Vancouver Island. That fire, burning aggressively in an area south of Port Alberni, has now grown to 20 square kilometers. 2 evacuation orders and several alerts remain in place as the fire has been forced the closure of the road to Bamfield. Crews remain on the ground as well as helicopters bucketing water onto the flames. Rain and cooler temperatures are in the forecast for Friday. A man has been shot to death in Maple Ridge early this morning. RCMP say they received reports of a shooting at one address and soon after found a badly injured man inside of a vehicle at a different location. That man was given emergency treatment but did not survive. Police say that the area around both crime scenes will be sealed off as investigators collect evidence. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team has now assumed conduct of the case. And Air Canada says it will begin a gradual suspension of flights as it faces a potential work stoppage by its flight attendants. The airline says some flights will be canceled tomorrow, with more on Friday. Its 10,000 flight attendants will be in a legal strike position late Friday night. Those are your news headlines. For more information, you can go to the website anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Tarnjeet Parmar, thank you very much. Tarnjeet reporting from our CBC Vancouver studio. We're going to get back to our top story now. Our Air Canada flight attendants are going to be able to walk off the job as of Friday at 9:58 p.m. The company, Air Canada, saying it's already preparing to cancel flights. We're joined by Ian Lee with Carleton University. Ian, I'm going to read a couple of comments from TikTok. Then we're going to get to Rob in Vancouver. You've been very patient, Rob. Islander says, just declare it a public utility, buy it out and run it as a not-for-profit. Simi Baby says, blame the company, not the workers. Babooni says it's a company problem. And Sierra says, this is why Air Canada should not have been privatized. And Dee writes us, Air Canada could have avoided this since December. Remember that. They rather inconvenience everybody. Rob, you've been patient from Vancouver. What do you make of this potential disruption to Air Canada flights?
Yeah, my dad's a retired Air Canada pilot. Mm-hmm. So is my stepmom, retired Air Canada flight attendant, originally Canadian, and good friend of mine is still an Air Canada flight attendant. The airline treats the pilots union a lot differently than the flight attendants. Mm-hmm. I definitely think there's like a sexism, patriarchy thing going on there historically. And I just think, what are our labor laws in this country if they were ever allowed this situation where they're only paid from pushback at the gate to arrival at the gate? That's ridiculous. They have to go to the airport, check in, here in Vancouver, they check in at one building, then they go to the airport, and then, the flight can be delayed or whatever. I just don't understand how this was ever legal. It's pretty nuts. Our labor laws are pretty weak in a lot of ways, and this is a real failure. And we wouldn't be in this situation if we had governments that realized it's pretty logical. You have to be an idiot not to realize that's not really a fair situation. I don't know if you mentioned it already, but beginning brand new, young, low seniority full-time flight attendants with Air Canada make about $27,000 a year gross, working full-time. And it's hard to have other jobs when you're a flight attendant. You have a weird schedule. It's just ridiculous.
Rob, we really appreciate your time and your perspective on that. Ian Lee, I want to put Rob's question to you. Is it legal for Air Canada to do this, that the union says we only get paid when the plane is actually moving?
Yes, it is, because they agreed to it in a previous collective agreement, and it didn't contravene any existing labor laws. Rob did raise a very important point. Your earlier caller saying nationalizing the airport and so forth, the airline, I think, is not feasible. The airlines have been privatized around the world. They're very, very capital intensive in the billions. The government of Canada has many other things on its plate other than nationalizing an airline. But that doesn't mean there's no solution. And as Rob suggested, this seems to cry out for amendments to the labor code passed by the Parliament of Canada, because transportation is a federal responsibility under the Constitution Act of Canada. And it seems to me that this is a longer-term solution, meaning once this strike is over, this could be examined by a parliamentary committee, the Transportation Committee, to legislating and revising the act to ensure that unpaid work becomes paid work.
I put a version of that question to Henly, but why do you think the Union for Flight Attendants would have agreed to that before?
This industry, and I don't want to be sounding like I'm supporting Air Canada. I don't consult to them. I do not own any shares. All I do is fly on their airline for the past 40 years. But the airline industry is an industry that we study all the time in business schools, as you can guess. It's very popular with students, and it's a terrible industry. I mean, they make, some years they make phenomenal profits, and other years they lose billions of dollars. Warren Buffett famously said, it was a very famous quote of his about 10 years ago. He said, he actually said this at a business school on videotape. He said, someone should have shot Orville Wright in 1906 or 1907 because he said that the cumulative losses in the airline industry in North America exceeded the cumulative profits from then until now. So it's an industry with very low margins long term. There's all kinds of pressures. I mean, there's just weather that's unpredictable. The planes are very expensive. And so the airlines, and again, I'm not trying to be sympathized. I'm just simply saying, why did they do this? They're looking for ways to cut their costs, whether it's charging us for, pillows and headphones and luggage, or trying to get unpaid work. And so it's the margins are terrible. It's not a highly profitable industry. Having said that, that's no excuse to not amend the labor code to prohibit this behavior.
Stan is joining us from Vanderhoof. Stan, what do you make of what's happening with Air Canada and the flight attendants?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just think that people have to look at this more of the macro, the big picture, and this is a union that's fighting for some rights and some fair pay in an industry that can pay either dividends or buy back shares in profitable years, and which they've had. But it almost seems like they just want to make the government step in and settle this thing in their favor, and that's what they're hoping for. And I think that for so many years, people have lost track of what unions have done for the working person in this country. And I was in unions for the first 15 years of my work life, and I had private businesses for the last 40 years. I'm 70 now, and I respect the unions and what they've done. We've fought for everything we've got so far, whether it's medical, dental, a 40-hour work week. It wasn't given to anybody. We fought for it. We went on strike for it. So no one should think that unions are greedy because they want a fair wage. That's go for it, strike, is what I say. And people shouldn't worry about one little trip to visit their aunt somewhere. I feel sorry for the lady who has surgery canceled or postponed, but you have to look at the big picture.
All right. Stan, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Ian Lee, I want to pick up on a point that you alluded to earlier when we asked about, and I asked Henly this, whether or not Air Canada can, in their mind, afford to pay the flight attendants for when they say they actually start working. Air Canada achieved, and this is from their press release, Air Canada achieved record annual revenues in 2024 of $22.3 billion on a 5% increase in capacity over 2023. Those sound like big numbers, but as you said, very high costs, and we're coming out of the depths of years of the pandemic when the industry was all but put into the ground.
That's correct. Again, I'm not here to defend Air Canada. The airline industry was savaged by COVID for the very obvious reason. Nobody could get on an airplane because the government shut them down and ordered us all home. We all know that. You could not fly. And so they hemorrhaged billions and billions of dollars, and for reasons that never became completely clear, the government of Canada did not provide the same level of support for the airline industry writ large that it did for other industries, and this was a chronic complaint that was made. Anyways, they're rebuilding now very successfully because the airline business has come back. But I don't want to leave you or the listener with the idea that Air Canada cannot afford this. they can pass it on, of course, through higher ticket prices. All companies are intermediaries. They charge, they have costs to produce their service or build their product, and then they pass all those costs on. Every last cost gets passed on, whether they're wages or the cost of the machines or the airplanes or the plant and the equipment and so forth. So yes, they can afford it through higher ticket prices to consumers.
Ian Lee, we'll wrap up with you with this last question. How do you see this continuing or ending? Do you expect the federal government to step in, or do you think we can reach a deal in time?
They may reach a deal in time because they know that the sword of Damocles is hanging over their head. If they don't settle, I predict, based on the stats that are on my screen right now from this article, from 1950 to 2024, the government of Canada intervened 44 times in strikes over a 74-year period. That's an average of once every 18 to 20 months. Government intervened with back-to-work legislation or orders to the CIRB, as they did with the post office. So there's a lot of tools in the government's hands, and the pressure will build every day there is a strike, because there'll be people screaming across Canada, screaming at their MPs and the ministers and the Prime Minister, do something, get them back to work. We can't sustain this, and it's because of our dependency in this vast second largest country in the world, this vast distances. And so the pressure is going to become inexorable on the government of Canada, and that's why I think they will step in, as they did in all those other strikes, Port of Vancouver, Port of Montreal, CN, CP, Canada Post. They've stepped in before, and I predict they will again if the strike continues.
Ian Lee, an economist and professor in the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. We always appreciate your time and the great perspective and knowledge you're able to, and history you're able to bring to this. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Dan. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Radio 1, CBC Television, live streaming on the CBC News app and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Many of you emailed us, and we're going to get to some of those tomorrow. Lots more on the day's top stories on your afternoon shows in your region here in Metro Vancouver. Here's what's coming up on the coast.
Hi there, Dan. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I wanted to flag a few things we've got lined up for On the Coast this afternoon. We are following up on a story that we reported on earlier this year. Due to deep government cuts in the U.S., hundreds of Afghan women studying abroad face deportation back to a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Now, Vancouver's Friba Rezai launched a global campaign for governments and universities to help. Well, the University of Regina has answered that call, so we're going to bring you up to date this afternoon. And we'll also try to answer your questions about this ongoing trade conflict with the United States. A business lawyer is going to join us and will help us sort through what tariffs still apply, where, and what that means for businesses and for consumers too. So join us this afternoon between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
That sounds good, Gloria. Thank you very much. Gloria Makarenko, host of On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver, and you can listen anywhere on the CBC News app. Just before we get to our next segment, lots of you emailed in about the Air Canada situation. I want to read a few of them. Lisa Green says, what I don't understand is how the staff got into this situation. Why did they ever accept the fact they would start to work without pay, meaning when the plane isn't moving? Doesn't make sense. Yes, I support the workers. I'm so tired of large corporations saying they can't afford to give staff raises and CEOs make millions. We've certainly heard that sentiment before. Others saying we have a flight booked to Europe by the end of August, returning 4 weeks for a 200-kilometer hike in Spain. It will be a nuisance if it's canceled, but we're 100% behind the flight attendants. And we will read more of your emails tomorrow. We are down to the final two in our search for BC's best symbol. After more than 400,000 ballots cast, yes, thank you. It is the totem pole versus the orca. And we want to hear from you. Even if your choice didn't make it into the final round, what do you think is BC's best symbol? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950. Pound 690 on your cell phone. Remember my excoriation, be pulled over or hands-free. 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver. And email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, or leave a comment on the old TikTok Live. Joining us is the Grand Master of this, CBC BC's Municipal Affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, the mastermind behind the summer bracket. Look what you have done, sir.
It's always lovely to get British Columbians angry at one another and at me when they have to choose what the best thing in this province is.
And it's not even a provincial election year. Shocking. You've done these brackets before. Yep. More than four. What is the count so far when it comes to votes cast?
Yeah, so we've gotten about 470,000 votes.
470
over the course of the last 5 weeks. We started with more than 300 submissions across the province when we asked people, what do you think BC's best symbol is? We took those 300 or so, put them in a list of 64 in 4 different categories: animal, nature, coastal symbols, and provincial symbols. We've had these votes again and again, whether it's been Canucks jerseys versus yoga pants, whether it's been BC Ferries versus SkyTrain, whether it's been the Spirit Bear versus the Black Bear, the Sockeye Salmon versus the Chinook Salmon, and now today we just have one vote left to determine the champion officially, objectively, scientifically. That was the word, right?
Why
is
not?
BC's best. And it's a really interesting matchup we have.
Mm-hmm. So let's go through it now. For those of you watching, we've got it on the screen. We have the orca versus totem poles. We have type, we have height, we have weight. Can you break it down for us there?
Yeah, well, and it's obviously, most people know what an orca and totem pole is. So we have, an animal in the sea versus a man-made carving on land. Totem poles, of course, come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They're predominantly made by First Nations along the north and central coast of the province, the Haida, the Nuka, the Tlingit, other groups as well. Less so in the south coast, although they have been used over time, although Coast Salish tends to do houseboats instead of totem poles. And of course, they're beloved everywhere, as are orcas. It's why the orca defeated the Spirit Bear in the quarterfinals and the Western Red Cedar in the semifinal to get here, and why the totem pole defeated the Dogwood Flower, our official flower, in the quarterfinals, and then in the semifinals defeated Northwest Coast Art. And so really it is, and the BC flag as well. And so it is an interesting stylistic matchup, of course, depending on what is closer to your heart, depending on what you might see more. But it's an interesting contrast in that both of them, there have been efforts around preservation, around ensuring that they are continue to exist, among ensuring that they continue to be honored, where Indigenous people have had a long connection, obviously, with both of them. Totem is self-explanatory, but with orcas long before we came here and how they were treated. And it's going to be interesting to see which people choose ultimately as the best.
No kidding. Let's go to Lorene in Tawasin. Lorene, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Who's your favorite BC symbol?
I think the orca wins hands down, simply because the totem pole is more of a localized Indigenous symbol to certain nations. Here in Tawasin, for example, I know that the symbols are house posts, welcome posts, and so the orca, however, is traveling the coastal waters from the Yukon border and beyond, and well past our Washington border. So it has a greater visibility maybe than authentic totem poles.
And Lorene, I have to ask, have you voted yet?
I did. I voted for orca.
Okay. You're a good sport, Lorene. We appreciate your call. Just before we get to Charlotte, I want to pick on something pick up on something you talked about. Both of these symbols, really, in different and contrasting, not in contrasting ways, but in different ways, were subjugated. They were relegated. And in some ways, totem poles put in museums, stolen, really.
Appropriated or hunted down, right? Orcas were called at one point the criminals of the sea.
That's right.
The totem poles were taken from their homelands and put in museums or just tourist attractions around North America, while the people who made them had their rights and land stripped from them. So symbols don't change. They have always been what they are for the most part. but yet our connection to them changes over time, and the reasons why we honor them or why we find them interesting change depending on our values and our culture. And so it's really interesting. If you had done this competition 50, 60, 70 years ago, totem poles still might be in it, although probably not doing as well as it's doing right now. Orcas certainly would not have. They were not really beloved until, ironically, they were first put in captivity.
That's
and
right.
People could see them and form a connection to them, and researchers could show all the intelligent and communal ways that they interacted. But here we are in 2025, and it really tells the story of how British Columbians evolved and changed with these two remarkable iconic symbols.
And a lot of that study of orcas, despite some horrific treatment, was done here in BC. When we learn more about them from the Marine Mammal Institutes and other places where scientists got a clearer picture of how intelligent and creative these animals are.
It was the capture of Moby Doll along Saturn Island, where we were at on Monday, some 60 years or so ago now, the second orca to be put in captivity, only put in captivity because they tried to shoot and kill Moby Doll, and they failed. And then the ability to actually research and look at her, and it struck a chord with British Columbians. As soon as they could see one up close for an extended period of time, as television starts becoming the dominant medium, it really makes people switch a light in their head and go, hold on, this is a creature that is so unique to this part of the world, and this is what we're doing with it, but look at how beautiful it is, look at how smart it is, and it really changes the whole ball game.
Let's go to Charlotte in Vancouver. Charlotte, who's your vote for?
My vote has to be for the orca, of course.
Why is that?
I love totem poles, and I absolutely have respect for all Indigenous people's artwork and forms for their culture. My auntie's Indigenous, my cousin's Indigenous. But, you know, I'm from the island, Vancouver Island, and I had a magical close-up experience with one fishing one morning. and I've never forgotten that in all of these years, and I still dream, if you can imagine this, because I lived in the Gulf Islands, I still dream of like swimming with pods of orcas, which is pretty extraordinary whenever I have one of those dreams.
That must be wonderful.
Like the previous, it doesn't. I've only had about 4 of them through my lifetime, but every time they're truly, it's magical.
And
Just
probably
like
best that their dreams.
It's something. I mean, I just can't express how. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but it's something.
Charlotte,
Anyways,
it's great.
It's true. They swim all north and south. They carry memories through the Indigenous culture. These are majestic animals, and we have to protect them. They're sacred. Like there's so many other animals and species in our territories that we have to protect, and these are just one of them. Totem poles are magical as well, but they can always make new ones still, which they do in the downtown east side. These whales can never be replaced, so they're very special. Okay,
Charlotte, they sure are.
My thing.
I appreciate your call, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ethan, also in Vancouver. Ethan, who did you vote for?
Yeah, so I actually voted for totem poles. I know I'm going against the grain a bit with our previous couple listeners there, but, you know, I think that totem poles really speak to, you know, in many ways, the history of this province. There's obviously, you know, any number of famous artists that we could list off that have done different poles that come to mind. And, you know, I recognize that it's a more coast-specific art piece, but yeah, I just think the historical aspects of totem poles are pretty important, and the storytelling aspects of totem poles really, really are unique. Not that there isn't storytelling associated with orcas, of course, but yeah, that's my vote.
Appreciate your call. Thank you very much. And you're not alone, Ethan. Scott Jansen emailed us to say it's clear that BC's best symbol must be the totem pole. Scott says the totem carries within it the orca, eagle, bear, and so many other beings that are central to both the natural beauty of BC and the cultures that have shaped the land since time immemorial. It's not just one symbol, he says. It's a collection of all of our symbols woven together in artistry, history, and identity. It only makes sense that it stand as the emblem of BC. Scott and Burnaby, we appreciate your call. Justin McElroy, what a privilege that they are a difficult choice between two very iconic and beautiful things, right?
What a lovely reflection of this province and the values that we have and the connection that we have to different things, right? You heard both sides of that with the totem and the orca and real reasons why you could say, well, that's the obvious choice. It has to be, right? And it really speaks to this connection that we have and how there are distinct things in British Columbia that if you were to ask, with apologies to Toronto, if you were to ask a Torontonian, what's the symbol of Canada, they wouldn't say the orca or the totem pole in the same way or with the same passion at all, most likely. But here on the West Coast in our province, there are these specific things that we do have these really layered connections with. And so it's been super cool to see so many people vote with passion and speak with passion when we've had these calls on the show today and in previous weeks. And the only question now is which one is going to win.
And when it comes to Toronto, it would be traffic jams versus raccoons. Sam in Vancouver. CBC Toronto, take your shots if you want. If you want to do your own bracket, do your own bracket. Sam in Vancouver, who would you vote for?
In this case, I would vote for the orca. I can think of other symbols that you've had up for choice, but I choose I love totem poles. I visited, up north. It's breathtaking. But the orca does not have to go through the transforming hands and thoughts and brains of human beings. The orca is nature. Just leave it alone. It's what we have that without touching it at all. I love the totem poles. Scott, I think, made a great case for the totem poles. But what we have here is it's not in the nature of man not to intervene. But in this case, all we have to do is just leave the thing alone. Leave the poor thing alone. And if you've ever seen orca, I mean,
Oh, it's stunning.
I don't have to go further than that. I can describe times that I've seen them, and it is really breathtaking.
And every time, and Sam, we appreciate your call. Justin, I mean, anytime an orca is in Deep Cove, Burrard Inlet.
When you're on a BC ferry, and the entire ferry seems the weight shifts as 2,000 people move to.
And more BMWs alarms go off.
You'd never you never forget your first time. And it is such an amazing emotional experience for so many people. And part of, we don't know who's going to win. Voting is open until 10 p.m. today. You can't see the results, so it's going to be a mystery until we announce on Friday on regional radio shows across the province in the morning. But the connection people have with animals is always so strong compared to other things, and it's a reason why across the world they can often be symbols for places. So you spoke to the reason why orcas could do well. There's a case for totems, as we've heard as well. It's really interesting to hear why these connections happen for people.
Justin McElroy, our CBC Municipal Affairs reporter. And yes, the winner will be revealed Friday morning on regional morning radio shows. And we will have a full hour special on BC Today with Justin and guests on Friday. That's it for our show. Thank you for calling in and emailing and joining the discussion. You can always message us, bctoday@cbc.ca.